Hello ladies and gentlemen of the internet, Messiah here. I'd hate to disappoint you guys, but I have some bad news. So, a few days ago I uploaded a 7-minute long preview of all the work I currently have done on the Zoroastrianism Explained video to my Patreon for backers. By the way, you guys are the GOATs. Now, originally I was going to have the whole video out by the end of March. We're over the halfway point for the month and I still have another 17 minutes left to edit. So now the whole schedule is probably going to be shifted back a bit. The reason for this is I was actually recently hospitalized in the ICU wing, where I almost died. So that was fun. Needless to say, even if I did feel like working, which I certainly didn't, I wasn't going to get much accomplished there, seeing as the internet sucked at the hospital. So we're kind of backtracked about a whole half a month's worth of progress. I've been picking up where I left off, and I'm trying to complete this video without it looking like a totally rushed mess, which leads me into today's video. I felt bad for delaying this major project for all of you, as well as Satan, again. So I decided I'd cut together a quick little video for you all dispelling some pseudo-theological Christian apologist video attempting to debunk the idea that Zoroastrianism influenced Judaism and subsequently Christian doctrine. My motivation behind doing this isn't purely malicious or trying to dispel anybody's faith. It's just that the arguments presented here are frankly nonsense. Let me know if you guys like this type of video or not, or whether or not you'd like to see something similar in the future. So, without further ado, let's begin.
Zoroastrianism, this is vitally important here. Zoroastrianism is thought by many. Zoroastrianism is thought by many to have influenced Judaism during the Persian captivity. Let me repeat that.
This guy does a lot of repeating himself over and over again, so if I skip around a bit, that's why. Also, before we proceed, I'd like to point out that comments have been turned off for this video, which is always a good sign.
The Persian captivity. The Persian captivity was between 538 BC and 330 BC.
I'm not sure if I'd call the Persians' reign over Judea a captivity. That's a lot more of an indicative word for what actually happened. You see, after the Persians kicked the Babylonians, technically the Chaldeans, out of the region, thus ending the exile of the Jewish people, Cyrus the Great was pretty chill about giving the Jews political autonomy. They certainly weren't slaves, and the Persians weren't trying to enforce foreign idol worship like the Assyrians did. If nothing else, you can kind of think of Jerusalem as a satellite state for the Persian Empire more so than an actual territory. Yes, they still had to pay tributaries, but compared to the other superpowers who held onto the Holy Land before them, the Persians treated the Jews exceptionally well. In fact, in 2 Chronicles chapter 36 verses 22 through 23, they actually give quite a lot of praise to King Cyrus. Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of Jehovah by the mouth of Jeremiah might be accomplished, Jehovah stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and put it also in writing, saying, Thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, All the kingdoms of earth hath Jehovah, the God of heaven, given me, and he hath charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whosoever there is among you of all his people, Jehovah his God be with him, and let him go up. They may have embellished some of his words here. If that's not proof enough, Cyrus the Great was also bestowed the title of Messiah by the post-exile Jews for ending their separation from the Holy Land, which is not a title that they give out lightly. The Persians were hardly what I would call captors, and they were certainly viewed favorably by the Jewish people at the time. So favorably, in fact, I'd wager to say that they might just listen to what a certain camel-related prophet might have to say about the duality of the universe, especially from a religion which is also technically monotheistic like them.
Now this is about 60 or 70 years after the prime of Zoroaster, the founder of Zoroastrianism. So because of this, many people teach that Zoroastrianism is thought to have influenced Judaism during the Persian captivity. So let me repeat that.
Holy fuck, I'm having flashbacks to Sunday school here with this minister talking down to his parishioners and repeating himself every 5 seconds like he's talking to a group of special needs first graders. I honestly don't know what this guy is on about here. Yes, Zoroastrianism had already hit its peak of popularity by this point, but that doesn't mean it wasn't still practiced by the people of Persia. In fact, it was still the state religion. Whether or not it was as popular as it once was is irrelevant. It can still very much influence the religions of other lands conquered by that empire. That's like saying that because church attendance is down in the United States, that political policy still isn't influenced by Judeo-Christian values, because if you ever listen to C-SPAN, it most certainly is. Some of our politicians still use arguments to religious authority to try and sway the legislative process, and sometimes they actually get their way. Overall, this is an incredibly weak and moot point.
Such beliefs as the doctrine of Satan, the doctrine of heaven, and the doctrine of hell. So they believe that Jews didn't have those beliefs, but that they got them way later.
You're missing quite a few here, but you did mention the big three, Satan, heaven, and hell. Let me fill in a few more things for you. The idea that the mortal soul is judged in the afterlife by God based on their good deeds, the 7 virtues, and a bit more loosely, the 7 deadly sins, the ideas of revelation and the final judgment day, which will see the triumph of good over evil and the raising of the dead, a singular divine prophet being sent by God to inform everyone that animal sacrifice totally isn't cool, and the idea of a perfect world created by God being tainted by the evils of a malevolent and jealous deity who is constantly trying to sway the hearts of man. Just to name a few.
Well, how should we respond to this? First off, in Job chapter 1, verse 6, Job is one of the oldest books of the Bible, and Job chapter 1, verse 6 reads this: Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them.
Oh, Jesus. Who else saw this coming from a mile away? Okay, so we're basing our singular argument against the influence of Zoroastrianism on a mistranslation, huh? I think it's pretty common knowledge to most people by this point, but to those of you who haven't heard this before, Satan, the proper noun, isn't mentioned until the Book of Chronicles, written well after the Babylonian exile, and doesn't become a central figure in the Bible until the New Testament some 300 or so years later. At least. Prior to this, the Jewish Holy Scriptures made mention of Ha-Satan, which is a Hebrew word meaning adversary or rival or something to that extent. When these texts were translated from Old Hebrew to Latin, the Catholic Church took quite a few liberties with them, reordering Chronicles to come immediately after Kings, even though it was written much, much later, and changing the Ha-Satan in the Book of Job into Satan, proper noun. I'll expand more on this if and when my Satan video finally comes out, but that's the abridged version of it. The long and short of it all is, the adversarial figure mentioned in Job is almost certainly not the Christian Satan.
Now Job was probably written about 2,000 years before Christ.
Nope. Most scholars believe Job was conceived sometime between the 7th and 4th centuries BC. Even if you want to be charitable and say that the story was written down from older oral traditions, you're still a good 1400 years or so off, and if you've ever played telephone as a kid, you know how messed up the story would be by that point.
The only way that you could say that the Jews got their belief about Satan from Zoroaster, which would have come about 1400 years later, the only way you can hold on to that type of view is if you hold a liberal view of Job. In other words, you believe that Job was a fairy tale written hundreds and hundreds of years or thousands of years after it was supposed to be written. You'd have to have it written 1,500 years later.
The liberal view of Job. That is actually hilarious considering the religious revisionism we just discussed being propagated by the New Age religion led by the long-haired hippie calling himself the Son of God. This is literally as ridiculous as Father Buttigieg rewriting the entire Bible from scratch so that he can be a gay, modern progressive and still shake hands at the local church potluck. I'd give this guy the same advice I'd give some Harry Potter fans. Read a different book. Actually challenge your belief system outside the confines of, but the Bible told me so. Otherwise, you're going to have an incredibly polarizing view of the world, and you're going to surround yourself with people who repeat the same arguments to authority, which only serves to lock you into a perpetual echo chamber. Now, there's not a whole lot more to this video, surprise surprise. The minister cherry-picked one doctrine of Zoroastrianism to refute, gave a few falsified dates, then called it an evening without even mentioning Sheol or the fact that Zoroastrianism actually has archaeological evidence to suggest it's a lot older than merely 2,600 years old. Plus the fact that the Bible isn't exactly immune to other outside influences from the Mediterranean, just like every other religion, and I'd say that this entire argument is nothing short of inadequate, much less horribly repetitious. In any case, thank you all so much for watching. My name is Messiahs in Mythology, and I apologize for my voice. I'm still trying to recover from my illness. The full video on Zoroastrianism will be coming soon-ish, provided I don't end up in a hospital again. Until then, folks, thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you all have a God's blessed day.